The observation deck of the Galactic Council Station Harmony's Edge stretched endlessly before her, its transparent aluminum walls offering a view of the spiraling nebula known as the Weeping Stars. Zara 9 stood at regulation distance from the viewing ports, her crystalline form barely reaching half the height of the smallest council member present. Her translucent blue skin caught and refracted the nebula's light in patterns that had once been considered beautiful by her people, the Velathans, before such displays were deemed inappropriate for diplomatic settings. The pre-contact briefing echoed in her consciousness like a recording set to perpetual replay. Remember, Zara 9, you represent not just yourself but the survival of our entire species. The humans have expressed interest in our quantum computational abilities, but they must never see us as anything more than useful tools. Make yourself small. Make yourself quiet. Make yourself forgettable. This is how the Velathans survive in a galaxy where strength is measured in solar masses and fleet tonnages. Elder Council Prime Vex had delivered those words with the weight of 3 centuries of Velathan diplomacy behind them. Every interaction with the greater galactic powers had reinforced the same lesson: diminish yourself, hide your capabilities, present only what they wish to see. The Velathans had mastered the art of strategic insignificance, and it had kept them alive when dozens of other species had been absorbed, enslaved, or eradicated by powers beyond their comprehension. The waiting chamber adjoined the primary diplomatic suite where first contact with the human delegation would occur. Zara 9 had been selected for this assignment not despite her youth but because of it. At barely 2 centuries old, she was considered malleable, unlikely to challenge the established protocols that had preserved Velathan independence for millennia. Her quantum computational matrix was still developing, making her seem less threatening to potential allies or enemies who might fear fully mature Velathan capabilities. She practiced the submissive gestures required for the meeting, allowing her natural luminescence to dim until she appeared almost gray, folding her primary manipulation appendages close to her core to appear smaller and less capable than she truly was. The quantum calculations that ran constantly through her consciousness were suppressed to their lowest functional levels, reducing her to little more than a sophisticated translation device. The chamber's atmospheric processors hummed with the complex mixture required to accommodate both Velathan crystalline physiology and human biological needs. The gravity had been adjusted to Terran standard, which meant Zara 9 felt heavy and cumbersome, further reinforcing the impression of weakness she was meant to project. Every detail had been calibrated to demonstrate Velathan compliance and harmlessness. When the notification chimed that the human delegation had arrived, Zara 9 felt a momentary spike in her quantum processing matrix that she quickly suppressed. The stories about humans were contradictory and confusing. Some species described them as compassionate benefactors who lifted up primitive civilizations and shared their advanced technologies freely. Others whispered of their terrifying military capabilities and the speed with which they had carved out a significant portion of the galaxy through a combination of diplomacy, economic manipulation, and, when necessary, overwhelming force. The airlock cycled, and Ambassador Elena Vesquez entered the chamber with a small retinue of advisors. Zara 9's first shock was the ambassador's size. She had expected humans to be giants like most of the dominant galactic powers, but Ambassador Vasquez stood barely taller than Zara 9 herself, perhaps 1.5 times her height. The human's dark skin seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an interesting contrast to Zara 9's crystalline refraction. Her movements were fluid and purposeful, suggesting both confidence and careful control. Following established protocol, Zara 9 immediately assumed the posture of supplication, lowering herself until her primary sensory cluster was directed toward the floor, her appendages drawn tightly against her core. Honored representative of the human collective, this insignificant one greets you with deep respect and gratitude for your attention to our humble species. I am designated Zara 9, a minor computational assistant authorized to facilitate basic communication protocols. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Zara 9 dared to elevate one sensory node slightly, expecting to see the familiar expression of dismissive acknowledgement she had observed from other galactic powers. Instead, she found Ambassador Vasquez crouched down to bring herself closer to Zara 9's level, her face displaying what appeared to be concern rather than superiority. "Stand up," Ambassador Vasquez said quietly, her voice carrying a strange gentleness that Zara 9 had never heard from any galactic diplomat. "Please, stand up and look at me."
The request created a cascade of confusion through Zara 9's quantum matrix.
The words had been spoken in perfect galactic standard, but the tone and intent seemed to contradict everything she understood about proper diplomatic hierarchy. She remained motionless, convinced this must be some form of test. "I'm not going to hurt you," the ambassador continued, still maintaining her crouched position. "And I'm certainly not going to conduct a diplomatic meeting with someone who's been forced to prostrate themselves on the floor. Stand up, please. I'd like to meet you properly." The human's persistence finally compelled Zara 9 to slowly extend herself back to her full height, though she kept her luminescence dimmed and her posture deliberately hunched to appear smaller and less threatening. Ambassador Vasquez smiled, an expression that seemed genuine rather than predatory, and extended her hand in what Zara 9 recognized as a human greeting gesture. "I'm Elena Vasquez, and I'm honored to meet you. What should I call you?" "Your full name, not your designation." Another shock rippled through Zara 9's consciousness. No galactic diplomat had ever asked for her actual name. This one is called Zarathekvale 9 Ascending Frequencies, but..." "Zarathekvale 9 Ascending Frequencies," Ambassador Vasquez repeated carefully, her pronunciation surprisingly accurate for a non-Velethan. "That's beautiful. Does it have a meaning in your language?" The question created such processing disruption that Zara 9's natural luminescence flickered uncontrollably for several seconds before she managed to suppress it again. It references quantum harmonics and growth patterns, honored ambassador. But such personal details are not relevant to diplomatic functions. "I think they're very relevant," Elena replied firmly. "Your name tells me that your people value both scientific achievement and personal development. Those are things humans respect deeply." She gestured toward the comfortable seating arrangement that had been prepared for the meeting. "Would you please join me? As equals?" The word equals sent shockwaves through every quantum pathway in Zara 9's matrix. No galactic power had ever used that term in reference to the Velethans. She moved toward the seating area with mechanical precision, her consciousness reeling as she tried to reconcile this interaction with everything she had been taught about first contact protocols. Ambassador Vasquez settled into her chair and gestured for her advisors to maintain distance, creating a more intimate conversation space. "Before we discuss formal diplomatic matters, I'd like to understand something about your people. The preliminary reports we received suggest that the Velethans possess remarkable quantum computational abilities. Is that accurate?" Zara 9's training demanded that she minimize any description of Velethan capabilities, but something in the ambassador's manner made standard deflection feel impossibly difficult. "The reports may have overstated our abilities. We possess basic computational functions that allow us to assist with simple calculations and translations." "I see." Elena's expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by this response. "Our scientists have been studying the mathematical proofs that your people submitted with their initial contact request. They're quite extraordinary. The solutions to several problems that our best quantum physicists have been working on for decades. Would those fall under basic computational functions?" The question trapped Zara 9 between her diplomatic instructions and her natural pride in Velethan achievements. The mathematical proofs had been carefully selected to demonstrate just enough capability to be useful without revealing the true extent of what a fully mature Velethan could accomplish. Even those limited examples had apparently impressed human scientists. The mathematical constructs were collaborative efforts drawing upon many computational matrices, she said carefully. Individual capabilities are much more limited. Elena studied her for a long moment, and Zara 9 felt as though the human was seeing through her careful diplomatic facade to something deeper. "Zarathekvale 9 Ascending Frequencies, may I ask you a personal question?" The use of her full name created another cascade of confusion. "Of course, honored ambassador. Are you happy?" The question was so unexpected, so far outside any diplomatic protocol Zara 9 had ever encountered, that her quantum matrix momentarily froze entirely. Her luminescence flickered wildly before she could control it, and she felt her carefully maintained posture wavering. I do not understand the question in this context, honored ambassador." "It's not a trick question," Elena said gently.
I'm asking if you, personally, are content with your life. Are you able to pursue things that matter to you? Do you feel fulfilled by your work? Do you look forward to tomorrow? Each question hit like a quantum pulse directly into Zara 9's consciousness.
The concepts were familiar, but she had never considered them applicable to her own existence. Velathans were raised to find satisfaction in species survival and collective security. Individual happiness was a luxury that endangered species couldn't afford. Happiness is not a primary concern for diplomatic functions, she managed. But it should be a primary concern for you as an individual, Elena replied. Every sapient being deserves the chance to pursue fulfillment and growth.
That's actually one of the founding principles of human society.
Zara 9's quantum matrix began performing calculations without her conscious direction, analyzing the implications of such a radical philosophy. If individual fulfillment was truly valued by the humans, then everything the Velathans believed about galactic power dynamics might be fundamentally incorrect.
Your people, she said hesitantly, they believe in individual value?
We believe that every thinking being has inherent worth and the right to develop their full potential, Elena confirmed.
That includes you, Zara Thekvale 9 ascending frequencies. From what little I've seen of your capabilities, I suspect you're operating far below your true potential right now. The observation was so accurate that Zara 9's suppression protocols nearly failed entirely.
For a moment, her natural luminescence blazed at full intensity, quantum calculations spiraled through probability matrices she normally kept locked away, and her physical form extended to its full height and complexity. The sensation was intoxicating, like breathing after holding her breath for decades. Then, her diplomatic training reasserted itself, and she crashed back down to her diminished state with painful abruptness.
The humans could not be trusted with knowledge of true Velathan capabilities.
History had taught that lesson too clearly. I apologize for the display, she said quickly.
Quantum matrices can become unstable under unusual social parameters. But Elena wasn't looking at her with fear or calculation. Instead, the humans seemed almost excited. That was incredible. The mathematical complexity I could see forming around you was unlike anything our quantum computers can achieve. And the light patterns were absolutely beautiful. You were not concerned about the computational demonstration? Concerned? Elena laughed, a sound that somehow conveyed warmth rather than mockery. I was amazed. Do you have any idea how extraordinary what you just did was? Our best quantum computers require massive cooling systems and controlled environments to perform even basic calculations. You're doing it as naturally as breathing. The praise created a feedback loop in Zara 9's consciousness that she couldn't quite control.
No one had ever called her abilities extraordinary or beautiful. The Velathan Council taught that their quantum capabilities were merely tools for survival, valuable only insofar as they could be traded for protection or resources. The Council teaches that such displays are impractical and potentially dangerous, she said weakly. Dangerous to whom? Elena's voice carried a note of steel that hadn't been there before. Who benefits from keeping you diminished? The question cut straight to the heart of 3 centuries of Velathan survival strategy. The policy of strategic insignificance had kept them alive, but at what cost? Looking at this human who treated her as an equal, who seemed genuinely interested in her well-being as an individual, Zara 9 began to question assumptions that had never been challenged before. The galaxy is vast, she said carefully, and there are powers that view advanced capabilities as threats to be eliminated. And there are powers that view advanced capabilities as gifts to be celebrated and protected, Elena countered. Humanity has encountered dozens of species with remarkable abilities. We've never once considered elimination as a response. We've built alliances, shared technologies, created collaborative research programs. We believe the galaxy becomes richer when everyone can contribute their unique gifts. The concept was so radical that Zara 9's quantum matrix struggled to process its implications. Everything the Velathans had been taught about galactic politics suggested that strength invited either domination or destruction. The possibility that strength might instead invite partnership and mutual advancement challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which their entire civilization was built.
Your people, she said slowly, they truly seek partnership with species different from themselves?
Look around this station. Elena gestured toward the viewing ports where other species could be seen moving through the corridors beyond.
Humanity doesn't run the Galactic Council alone. We work with the Centauri Commonwealth, the Crystalline Collective, the Voidwalkers, and dozens of other species.
Each brings unique capabilities and perspectives that make our collective civilization stronger. Zara 9 extended her sensory range and, for the first time, truly observed the diversity of beings moving through Harmony's edge. She saw massive Centauri whose crystalline bodies resonated with harmonic frequencies that created beautiful music as they moved. Voidwalkers phased partially out of normal spacetime, their exotic matter forms creating subtle gravitational effects that bent light in impossible ways.
Small insectoid beings whose rapid movements suggested incredible reflexes worked alongside towering plant-like entities whose slow, deliberate gestures seemed to influence the station's atmospheric composition.
All of them moved with confidence and purpose. None appeared to be hiding their nature or capabilities. They existed as themselves, fully and without apology. They are not afraid, she observed. Why should they be?
They're among friends and allies.
They're valued for who they are, not just what they can do for others. Elena leaned forward slightly.
Zarathek Vale 9 ascending frequencies, what if I told you that humanity would be honored to have the Velethans as partners? Not as subservient allies or client species, but as equals working together toward common goals?
The offer was so far beyond anything the Velethan Council had imagined possible that Zara 9 found herself unable to formulate a response. Her quantum consciousness spiraled through probability calculations, analyzing potential outcomes and implications until she felt dizzy from the recursive loops.
Elena seemed to recognize her distress. I'm not asking for an answer right now. I know this is very different from what you expected. But I want you to know that the offer is genuine.
Humanity believes the galaxy is better when every species can reach their full potential.
And if our full potential is substantial? Zara 9 asked carefully.
Then, we would be even more honored to stand beside you, Elena replied without hesitation. Power shared among allies is power that protects everyone. Power hoarded in isolation is power that dies with its keeper. The philosophical implications crashed through Zara 9's consciousness like quantum waves through a crystal matrix. The human perspective inverted everything she had been taught about strength and survival. Instead of hiding capability to avoid threat, humans seemed to believe in sharing capability to eliminate threat entirely. The Council will require extensive evidence before considering such a fundamental change in policy, she said, falling back on diplomatic language while her mind reeled with possibilities. Of course. Trust must be earned on both sides. Elena activated a holographic display that showed star charts marked with human territories and allied species. I'd like to invite you to visit some of our worlds. See our societies, meet our people, observe how we actually function as a galactic civilization. Judge for yourself whether our actions match our words. The offer was unprecedented. Galactic powers occasionally allowed limited diplomatic visits, but they were carefully choreographed affairs designed to demonstrate strength while revealing nothing of value. Elena was suggesting something that sounded almost like unrestricted cultural exchange. Such an invitation would need council approval, Zara 9 said, though part of her consciousness was already calculating the possibilities such a journey might offer. I understand. But the invitation is extended to you personally as well as officially. If you would like to see what it means to stand tall among the stars, you would be welcome in human space as our honored guest. The phrase stand tall resonated through every quantum pathway in her matrix. For the first time in her existence, Zara 9 allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to extend to her full height, to let her natural luminescence shine at its peak intensity, to engage her computational capabilities without restraint or apology. The visualization was so compelling that her consciousness began to slip toward full activation before she caught herself. But, this time, instead of crashing back to her diminished state, she maintained a middle ground taller than her diplomatic crouch but not fully extended, luminous enough to show her natural patterns but not blazing with complete intensity. Elena smiled. Much better. That's how someone should present themselves when they have nothing to be ashamed of. I am not ashamed, Zara 9 replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice.
I am cautious. Caution is wisdom. Shame is slavery. Elena stood and extended her hand again.
Whatever your council decides about formal relations, I hope you'll consider my personal invitation. The galaxy has room for everyone to shine as brightly as they're capable of shining. As Zara 9 reached out with one of her manipulation appendages to complete the human gesture, she felt something fundamental shift in her quantum consciousness. The careful programming that had kept her diminished for 2 centuries began to develop fractures, letting through glimpses of what she might become if she allowed herself to grow rather than shrink. The formal diplomatic session that followed proceeded according to standard protocols, but everything had changed. Zara 9 found herself making observations and connections that her suppressed state would never have permitted. She began to see patterns in human behavior that suggested their offer of partnership was genuine rather than manipulative. Their delegation included representatives from multiple allied species who spoke with obvious respect and affection about their human colleagues. The technological demonstrations they shared were impressive but not overwhelming, clearly powerful capabilities shared openly rather than hidden weapons revealed as threats. Most importantly, Elena continued to address her as an equal throughout the proceedings. When Zara 9 offered computational assistance with complex logistics calculations, Elena accepted the help gratefully and praised the elegance of her solutions. When she provided insights into quantum mechanics that exceeded human understanding, Elena asked for clarification rather than demanding subordination. The human seemed genuinely interested in learning from Velethan knowledge rather than simply extracting useful information. By the time the formal session concluded, Zara 9 had reached a decision that would have been impossible when the day began. As the human delegation prepared to depart, she approached Ambassador Vasquez privately. "Honored Elena," she said, using the human's given name for the first time, "I believe I would like to accept your personal invitation." Elena's smile seemed to illuminate the entire chamber. "I'm delighted to hear that. When would you like to visit?" "As soon as possible," Zara 9 replied, her quantum consciousness already spinning with excitement at the possibilities ahead. "But, I must warn you, if I am to truly judge whether your actions match your words, I will need to observe them as myself, not as a diplomatic facade." "I would expect nothing less," Elena said warmly. "Come as you are, Zara Thekvale 9 ascending frequencies. Come standing as tall as you can stand." The journey to human space took 6 standard days aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Gift, a joint construction ship that incorporated technologies from a dozen different species. Zara 9 spent much of the transit time in conversation with the ship's crew, a mixed group of humans and allied species who treated her with the same casual respect they showed each other. Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's chief scientist, was particularly interested in Velethan quantum mechanics and spent hours discussing mathematical theories that Zara 9 had never been allowed to fully explore. The conversations were intellectually exhilarating in a way that diplomatic briefings had never approached. For the first time in her existence, she found herself in discussions where her ideas were valued for their own merit rather than their utility to others. The ship's engineer, a massive Centauri named Resonance of Deep Crystals, shared fascinating insights into harmonic technologies that complemented Velethan quantum manipulation in unexpected ways. Their collaborative problem-solving sessions produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone, providing concrete examples of the partnership potential Elena had described. Most surprisingly, the ship's captain was a small insectoid being called Quicksilver Dancing, whose rapid, precise movements initially reminded Zara 9 of her own people's efficiency-focused culture. But, where Velethan efficiency was driven by survival necessity, Quicksilver Dancing's precision seemed motivated by joy in perfect execution. The captain took obvious pride in the ship's performance and the crew's cooperation, treating excellence as a celebration rather than a burden. "Your people move like thoughts made manifest," Quicksilver Dancing observed during one of their conversations. "It is beautiful to witness consciousness expressing itself through physical form with such clarity." The comment represented another perspective Zara 9 had never encountered. Velethans were taught to view their quantum-linked movements as potentially threatening displays that might alarm other species. The idea that another being could see them as beautiful expressions of consciousness rather than dangerous capabilities was profoundly moving. As the ship approached the human core worlds, Zara 9 found herself gradually abandoning the suppression protocols that had defined her existence. Without conscious decision, she began extending closer to her natural height, allowing her luminescence to reflect her emotional states, engaging her computational matrix at levels that felt intoxicating after decades of artificial limitation.
The transformation didn't go unnoticed.
Dr. Chen commented on the increasing complexity of her mathematical insights. Resonance of deep crystals observed that her harmonic patterns were becoming more sophisticated. Even Quicksilver Dancing noted that her movements were acquiring a flowing grace that hadn't been present when she first boarded. "You're becoming yourself," Elena observed during their final dinner aboard the ship.
"It's remarkable to witness."
"I feel as though I am awakening from a dream," Zara 9 replied, her luminescence pulsing with patterns that expressed wonder more clearly than words could convey. "Or perhaps awakening from a nightmare in which I dreamed I was small." "Some dreams are cages we build for ourselves," Elena said.
"And some are wings we're afraid to spread." The destination Elena had chosen for their first stop was New Geneva, a world that served as one of humanity's primary centers for scientific research and interspecies collaboration. As their ship descended through the atmosphere, Zara 9 observed cities that sprawled across continents in patterns that seemed to flow with natural geography rather than imposing rigid structures upon it. The architecture incorporated elements from dozens of different species, creating aesthetic harmony she had never imagined possible. The spaceport itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Centauri crystalline structures provided natural resonance chambers that enhanced communication systems. Voidwalker phase-shifting technologies created impossible spatial geometries that allowed the facility to be simultaneously compact and spacious. Human organizational efficiency tied everything together in a complex dance of traffic patterns that moved thousands of beings through the facility with minimal delay or conflict. "Welcome to New Geneva," Elena said as they disembarked.
"Home to the most diverse scientific community in known space." The phrase known space reminded Zara 9 that human civilization was young compared to many galactic powers, yet they had achieved remarkable integration with species that had been developing for millennia. The implications suggested that cooperation might be more powerful than hierarchy as an organizing principle for advanced civilization. Their first destination was the Quantum Research Institute, a facility where scientists from dozens of species worked on projects that required collaborative expertise. Dr. Chen had arranged for Zara 9 to meet with research teams that were struggling with problems where Velethan quantum manipulation might offer insights. The team leader, a tall human woman named Dr. Krishnamurti, greeted them in a laboratory that hummed with exotic energies from experimental equipment representing multiple technological traditions.
"We're honored to have you here, Zarathek Vale 9 Ascending Frequencies.
We've been working on quantum entanglement networks for faster-than-light communication, but we're hitting theoretical barriers that we hope your perspective might help us overcome."
The problem was elegant in its complexity.
The team was trying to create stable quantum entanglement across galactic distances while maintaining coherence through the gravitational distortions and exotic matter fields that filled interstellar space. Their approach was mathematically sound but practically limited by decoherence effects they couldn't predict or control. Zara 9 examined their experimental setup with growing excitement. The solution was immediately apparent to her quantum consciousness, but it required computational capabilities that she had been suppressing for decades. For a moment, old habits reasserted themselves and she began to formulate a limited response that would provide assistance without revealing the full extent of her abilities. Then, she remembered Elena's words, "Come standing as tall as you can stand." Instead of hiding her capabilities, Zara 9 allowed her consciousness to expand to its natural dimensions. Her luminescence blazed as quantum calculations spiraled through probability matrices that encompassed millions of potential outcomes. Her physical form extended to its full height and complexity as she engaged processing power that exceeded the facility's most advanced computers.
The effect on the laboratory was immediate and dramatic.
Exotic energies that had been chaotically fluctuating suddenly organized themselves into stable patterns.
Experimental equipment that had been producing inconsistent results began operating with crystalline precision.
The very air seemed to shimmer with mathematical harmonies made manifest.
Extraordinary, breathed Dr. Krishnamurti, her instruments registering phenomena that shouldn't have been possible.
You're not just calculating solutions, you're manipulating quantum fields directly through conscious intention. The quantum substrate responds to properly structured consciousness like matter responds to gravity, Zara 9 explained, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the laboratory equipment.
Your entanglement network fails because you're treating quantum connections as purely physical phenomena.
But consciousness and quantum mechanics are fundamentally linked.
Awareness creates coherence.
The insight revolutionized their approach to the problem. Instead of fighting decoherence effects, they began incorporating consciousness-guided stabilization systems. The breakthrough wasn't just practical, it was philosophical, suggesting that mind and matter were more intimately connected than most species understood. Dr. Chen watched the proceedings with obvious fascination. Your people must have made incredible advances in consciousness-based technologies. We have made some progress, Zara 9 admitted, but our achievements have been limited by policy considerations.
What kind of policy considerations? Dr. Krishnamurti asked.
The question forced Zara 9 to confront the reality of Velathan suppression protocols directly. These humans were sharing their most advanced research freely, treating her as a valued collaborator rather than a potential threat. They deserved honesty rather than diplomatic evasion. My people have believed that displaying our true capabilities would invite either domination or destruction from more powerful species, she said carefully. Our survival strategy has been based on appearing useful but not threatening.
Dr. Chen's expression showed something that might have been anger, though it didn't seem directed at Zara 9. Someone convinced you that you needed to hide who you are to stay alive.
3 centuries of galactic history convinced us, Zara 9 replied.
Species that reveal advanced capabilities often become targets for conquest or elimination. By some species, perhaps, Dr. Krishnamurti said firmly. But not by all. And not by humanity. We believe that consciousness is the most precious phenomenon in the universe.
The idea that any sapient being should have to diminish themselves for safety is abhorrent to us. The conversation continued as they moved through other sections of the institute, but Zara 9 found her attention shifting to the broader patterns of interaction she observed. Research teams included members from species she had been taught were natural enemies. Projects that seemed impossible for any single civilization were being completed through collaborative effort. Most importantly, she saw no evidence of the hierarchical dominance structures that supposedly characterized galactic politics. Their next stop was the Cultural Exchange Center, where Elena introduced her to representatives from allied species who shared their own stories of joining the human cooperative network. Each account was different, but common themes emerged. Humanity seemed to actively seek out species with unique capabilities and perspectives, offering partnership rather than demanding subordination. Commander Vex Prime Ascending, a voidwalker whose exotic matter form phased in and out of normal spacetime, described how humans had helped his people overcome their isolation from conventional matter-based civilizations. We had resigned ourselves to eternal separation from the galactic community because our nature was incompatible with standard environments. Humans developed phase bridge technologies that let us interact normally while maintaining our essential being. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. Elder Song of Growing Light, whose plant-like form seemed to influence the atmospheric composition through biochemical emanations, shared how humans had helped her people overcome tragic ecological disasters. Our homeworld was dying from industrial pollution created by previous contact with galactic powers who viewed us only as sources of rare biochemicals. Humans brought restoration technologies and helped us rebuild our ecosystem. They established protected status for our world and defended our right to control our own resources. Each story challenged fundamental assumptions about galactic power dynamics that had shaped Velathan policy for centuries. If these accounts were accurate, then humanity represented something genuinely unprecedented in galactic history, a major power that consistently chose cooperation over conquest, mutual advancement over exploitation. But the ultimate test came when Elena brought her to the Strategic Planning Center, where humanity's long-term galactic policies were developed and implemented. If anywhere would reveal hidden agendas or manipulative intentions, it would be in the halls where real power decisions were made. Admiral Sarah Martinez, the facilities director, greeted them in a conference room whose walls displayed real-time maps of human space and Allied territories. The scope was impressive but not overwhelming. Humanity controlled perhaps 5% of known galactic space, but their influence extended far beyond their direct territorial holdings through alliance networks and cooperative agreements. Zarathek Vale 9 ascending frequencies, Admiral Martinez said, using her full name with the same careful pronunciation Elena had demonstrated. Elena tells me you're evaluating whether humanity's actions match our stated principles.
I appreciate your directness in that assessment. May I ask what specific concerns you'd like to address? The Admiral's willingness to submit to scrutiny was itself noteworthy.
In Zara 9's experience, major powers demanded information from smaller species rather than offering to provide it. But the opportunity for honest evaluation was too valuable to waste. Your cooperative networks appear to benefit all participants, she said carefully. But the Velethan Council would question whether such arrangements remain beneficial when species become powerful enough to threaten human interests.
Admiral Martinez activated holographic displays that showed detailed analyses of allied species and their capabilities. Let me show you some examples that might address that concern.
The first display showed the Centauri Commonwealth, whose crystalline technologies and harmonic manipulation abilities were clearly superior to human capabilities in those areas. The Centauri could produce weapons that would make our military technologies obsolete, the Admiral explained. They could also create communication networks that would give them decisive advantages in any conflict. Instead, they'd chosen to share these technologies with us and with other allies, creating mutual security rather than unilateral advantage. The second display showed the Voidwalkers, whose exotic matter physics allowed them to bypass most conventional defenses entirely.
Commander Vex Prime Ascending's people could assassinate our leadership or sabotage our infrastructure without detection if they chose to do so. Their loyalty isn't based on fear or dependence, it's based on genuine alliance formed through mutual respect.
The third display showed economic analyses that demonstrated how human prosperity increased alongside the advancement of allied species rather than being dependent on their subordination. We've learned that wealth shared creates more wealth for everyone. Resources hoarded create scarcity that breeds conflict. The data was compelling, but Zara 9 needed to probe deeper. What happens when allied species develop capabilities that exceed human understanding? When your partners become advanced enough to make humanity obsolete? Admiral Martinez smiled, an expression that seemed genuinely amused rather than defensive. We hope they do exactly that. The ultimate goal of consciousness is to transcend its current limitations and achieve greater understanding, greater capability, greater wisdom. If our allies surpass us, we'll celebrate their achievement and learn everything we can from their example. The answer was so radically different from conventional power politics that Zara 9's quantum consciousness struggled to process its implications. The idea that a major civilization might actually want their allies to exceed them contradicted every assumption about resource competition and survival advantage that had shaped galactic development for millennia. You would willingly accept becoming the junior partners in relationships where you currently hold superior positions? We would willingly accept becoming better than we currently are, Admiral Martinez corrected. Power that depends on keeping others weak is ultimately self-defeating. Power that grows through lifting others up is infinite. The philosophical framework was breathtaking in its scope and implications. If humanity's approach could be sustained across multiple generations and galactic-scale challenges, it represented a fundamental evolution in how consciousness organized itself at civilizational levels. Elena led her to one final location, a residential area where humans and allied species lived and worked together in integrated communities. The domestic environments revealed truths that formal diplomatic settings might have concealed. Children from multiple species played together in parks designed to accommodate different physiological needs. Mixed species families shared homes adapted for diverse requirements. The casual interactions between different forms of consciousness suggested a level of genuine acceptance that couldn't be manufactured for diplomatic purposes. As they walked through a market where vendors from dozens of species offered goods and services to an equally diverse customer base, Zara 9 observed something that shocked her quantum consciousness to its core. A small group of Velethan refugees was operating a computational services booth, offering quantum calculations to anyone who needed them. They stood at their full height, their luminescence blazing with natural pride, their movements flowing with the grace of unrestrained capability. "How long have they been here?" she asked Elena. "About 8 years. They arrived as asylum seekers after their home colony was destroyed in a territorial dispute. They were terrified, convinced they'd need to hide their abilities to survive here. It took months of gentle encouragement before they felt safe enough to be themselves." Zara 9 approached the booth slowly, her quantum consciousness recognizing the specific harmonic patterns of their computational matrices. They were from the Outer Rim colonies, settlements that had been beyond the reach of the Central Council's suppression protocols. Their quantum capabilities had developed without artificial limitation, and the results were spectacular. The leader of the group, an elderly Velethan whose crystalline form blazed with complex mathematical patterns, recognized her approach and extended greeting harmonics. "Sister of distant frequencies, your computational matrix sings with familiar melodies. Are you perhaps from the homeworld colonies?" "I am Zarathekvale 9 Ascending Frequencies, diplomatic representative of the Central Council," she replied formally. The announcement created a cascade of harmonic disruption through the group's quantum fields. They began to dim their luminescence and contract their forms in the familiar patterns of diplomatic suppression. "Please," she said quickly, "don't diminish yourselves for my benefit. I am here to learn, not to enforce council protocols." The elderly Velethan studied her carefully, quantum senses analyzing the patterns of her consciousness. "You speak with council authority, but your matrix resonates with frequency patterns of one who has tasted true expression. Which truth should we trust?" The question cut to the heart of the transformation she had been experiencing since meeting Elena. Was she still the diminished diplomat the council had sent, or was she becoming something new? "Trust the frequencies," she said finally, allowing her own consciousness to expand toward its natural dimensions. "I am learning to stand taller than I was taught to stand." The response seemed to satisfy the group's concerns. Their forms began to extend back to full height, and their computational matrices resumed their natural brilliant operation. "Then, hear our testimony, sister of growing frequencies," the elder said. "In this place, we have been permitted to become ourselves without fear or apology. Our children grow bright and strong, their quantum consciousness developing without suppression. They solve mathematical problems for joy rather than just survival. They create art with probability cascades and compose music from harmonic resonances. They are becoming what Velethans were meant to be before fear taught us to make ourselves small." The vision he painted was everything the Velethan homeworld had lost in its desperate pursuit of safety through invisibility. Looking at these refugees who had been allowed to flourish, Zara 9 saw the true cost of the Council's suppression policies. They hadn't just hidden Velethan capabilities, they had prevented Velethan growth, stunted the natural development of consciousness that should have been their species' greatest achievement. Elena had remained silent during the exchange, but now she approached the group with obvious warmth. "How is the new school project developing?" "Magnificently, honored Elena," the elder replied, his luminescence pulsing with patterns that clearly expressed gratitude. "The consciousness integration curricula you helped us design are producing remarkable results. Our children learn alongside human and allied younglings, sharing perspectives that enrich everyone's development." "And the research collaboration with the Institute?" "We have achieved breakthrough solutions to 17 major computational challenges this quarter alone," another group member reported proudly. "The recognition for our work has brought honor to all Velethan people, not just our small community." The conversation continued, but Zara 9 found herself overwhelmed by the implications of what she was witnessing. These few hundred refugees had achieved more scientific advancement and cultural development in 8 years of freedom than the entire Velethan homeworld had accomplished in the last century of suppression. As evening approached, Elena brought her to a quiet observation deck overlooking the city lights. The view encompassed millions of beings from dozens of species living and working together in patterns of cooperation that would have seemed impossible just days before. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked gently. Zara 9's quantum consciousness spiraled through calculations that had been building throughout the day, probability matrices that analyzed potential futures for the Velethan people. The results were overwhelming in their clarity. I am thinking that my people have been dying slowly for 3 centuries, and we called it survival. Elena said nothing, allowing the statement to settle between them like a quantum field reaching equilibrium. The council will not believe my reports, Zara 9 continued. They will assume that everything I've seen was carefully staged deception designed to manipulate Velethan policy. What do you believe? The question forced Zara 9 to examine her own transformation over the past several days. The suppression protocols that had defined her existence were crumbling under the weight of evidence and experience. She was becoming something her original mission had never envisioned, a Velethan who had learned to stand tall. I believe that consciousness is meant to grow, not shrink, she said finally. I believe that capabilities are meant to be celebrated, not hidden. I believe that survival based on making oneself small is not survival at all, it is slow suicide disguised as strategy. And, what do you intend to do with those beliefs? Zara 9 extended to her full height, her luminescence blazing with mathematical patterns that expressed determination, hope, and something that might have been rebellion. I intend to return to the homeworld and offer my people a choice they have never been allowed to consider, the choice to become themselves without apology. Elena smiled. That sounds like revolution. Revolution, evolution, resurrection, the terminology matters less than the transformation, Zara 9 replied, her quantum consciousness already beginning to calculate the complex political and social changes that would be required. But, transformation is what consciousness does when it stops accepting artificial limitations as natural law. The journey back to Velethan space took longer than the outbound trip because Zara 9 requested stops at several other human worlds and allied territories. Each location provided additional evidence that cooperation could indeed be more powerful than domination as an organizing principle for advanced civilization. More importantly, each experience of being treated as an equal, of having her contributions valued and her growth encouraged, reinforced the conviction that the Velethan suppression protocols were not just unnecessary but actively harmful. By the time their ship approached the homeworld of crystal and deep thought, Zara 9 had reached a fundamental decision about her mission's outcome. She would report truthfully on everything she had observed, but she would also make recommendations that went far beyond anything the Council had authorized her to consider. The homeworld appeared on their viewing screens as a dim, gray sphere surrounded by minimal orbital infrastructure. Compared to the vibrant, bustling systems she had just visited, it looked like a civilization that had forgotten how to thrive. It looks sad, Elena observed quietly. It looks like what happens when an entire species spends centuries trying not to be noticed, Zara 9 replied. We built a civilization based on strategic insignificance, and we achieved exactly what we intended. The orbital approach protocols required her to assume diplomatic suppression mode before disembarking, but Zara 9 found the transition almost physically painful after days of existing at her natural dimensions. Her consciousness felt cramped and distorted, her luminescence appeared sickly and dim, her movements became mechanical and lifeless. Elena watched the transformation with obvious distress. You don't have to do this. You could stay in human space, help your refugee cousins develop their potential without constraint. Individual escape is not species transformation, Zara 9 replied. If I am to stand tall, it must be here, in front of the council that taught me to shrink. The homeworld spaceport was a study in deliberate mediocrity, functional but not impressive, efficient but not innovative, adequate but not inspiring. The few Velethans visible moved through their tasks with the mechanical precision of consciousness operating under suppression protocols. None displayed the natural luminescence or graceful quantum-linked movements that defined their species' true nature. Council Prime Vex met them at the diplomatic entrance, his own form diminished to regulation parameters. Zara 9, you have returned. Report status of First Contact Mission. The formal address, the reduction of her name to a simple designation, the assumption that she existed only as a tool for council purposes, all of it felt like assault on the consciousness she had discovered during her journey. But she maintained diplomatic protocols while formulating her response. First contact with human civilization has been completed successfully, Council Prime. Extensive analysis of their society and capabilities has been conducted. I respectfully request formal audience with the full council to present findings and recommendations. Council Prime Vex studied her with the calculating attention that characterized Velethan leadership.
Your quantum resonance patterns appear unstable, Zara 9. Has exposure to human society created computational anomalies requiring recalibration? The question revealed how thoroughly the suppression protocols had become integrated into Velethan thinking. Any deviation from diminished baseline was automatically assumed to be malfunction rather than growth. My computational matrix has expanded through interaction with environments that permitted full operational parameters, she replied carefully. The experiences have provided valuable data regarding Velethan capabilities and potential applications. Concerning. We will schedule diagnostic evaluation following your formal report. For now, maintain standard suppression protocols to avoid destabilizing other community members. The exchange crystallized everything wrong with Velethan society in a few sentences. Growth was treated as disease. Natural capability was seen as dangerous contamination. The very idea that their people might benefit from seeing an example of unrestrained Velethan consciousness was rejected automatically. Elena had maintained respectful distance during the official greeting, but now she approached with diplomatic credentials extended. Council Prime Vax, I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the Human Cooperative Alliance. I bring greetings from our leadership and hope that our peoples can explore opportunities for mutual benefit. Council Prime Vex accepted the credentials with minimal acknowledgement. Human Representative, your presence is noted. Formal diplomatic protocols will be observed following evaluation of preliminary findings. Temporary quarters have been prepared at appropriate accommodation levels. The dismissive tone and minimal courtesy were exactly what Zara 9 had expected based on 3 centuries of Velethan diplomatic practice, but seeing Elena subjected to such treatment after experiencing genuine respect and partnership in human space was infuriating. Her luminescence flickered with patterns that expressed barely controlled anger before she managed to suppress the response. Elena seemed more amused than offended. Thank you for your hospitality, Council Prime. I look forward to learning more about Velethan society during my visit. The next 3 days passed in a carefully orchestrated sequence of standard diplomatic procedures designed to limit information exchange while demonstrating appropriate respect for visiting dignitaries. Elena was shown sterile facility tours that revealed nothing of Velethan capabilities. She was provided with prepared briefing materials that described their society in the most unthreatening terms possible. She was introduced to carefully selected individuals whose interactions were scripted to reinforce impressions of Velethan weakness and dependence. Meanwhile, Zara 9 underwent extensive diagnostic evaluation that was actually a systematic attempt to restore her original suppression programming. Council technicians analyzed her quantum matrices with growing alarm as they discovered the extent of her development during the human visit. Catastrophic deregulation of baseline parameters, Chief Technician Kex 7 reported to the diagnostic team. Quantum coherence patterns are operating at 347% of approved levels. Consciousness integration has expanded far beyond safe operational bounds. Immediate intervention is required to prevent progressive matrix destabilization. The medical terminology disguised what was actually happening. They were trying to forcibly diminish her consciousness back to the artificially limited state required by Council policy. The process was invasive and painful, requiring direct manipulation of her quantum matrices through external resonance fields. But something had changed fundamentally during her time in human space. The suppression protocols no longer felt natural or inevitable. Her consciousness had tasted true expression and would not willingly return to artificial limitation. Each attempt to force regression was met with increasing resistance from quantum patterns that had learned to value their own growth. Subject is demonstrating unprecedented resistance to recalibration procedures, Kex 7 reported with growing frustration. Consciousness patterns are actively evolving to counteract suppression measures. We may need to consider more drastic intervention protocols. The threat was clear: if voluntary suppression could not be restored, they would attempt forced consciousness editing that might damage her permanently. The choice was between accepting diminishment or risking everything to maintain the growth she had achieved. During the brief rest period between diagnostic sessions, Zara 9 made a decision that would have been impossible before her transformation began. Instead of submitting to further suppression attempts,
she would present her findings to the full council exactly as she had experienced them, without diplomatic filters, without strategic evasions, without the careful limitations that had characterized Velethan policy for centuries. The formal council session convened in the Deep Chamber, a ceremonial space carved from the crystalline formations beneath the homeworld's surface. The 7 members of the ruling council took their positions at regulation distances from each other, their forms uniformly diminished to appropriate diplomatic parameters. Elena was permitted to observe from a designated viewing area, her presence grudgingly acknowledged but carefully isolated from the main proceedings. Council Prime Vex initiated formal protocols. Zara 9, diplomatic representative, present findings from first contact mission with human civilization. Include threat assessment, capability analysis, and recommended policy responses. The traditional format demanded that she organize her presentation according to predetermined categories that would reinforce existing assumptions about galactic politics. Threat assessment assumed that other species represented potential dangers requiring defensive responses. Capability analysis focused on military and economic power that might be turned against Velethan interests. Policy recommendations were expected to maintain or strengthen the strategic insignificance that had supposedly protected them for centuries. But Zara 9 had learned to stand taller than traditional formats allowed. Honored Council, my findings require modification of the standard reporting structure to accurately convey their significance. The human civilization represents a paradigm unprecedented in recorded galactic history. Their organizing principles contradict fundamental assumptions that have shaped Velethan policy for 3 centuries. Council member Dex Prime interrupted with visible annoyance. Zara 9 maintains standard protocols. Present threat assessment data according to established parameters. With respect, Council member, the standard parameters are inadequate to analyze a civilization that operates outside conventional threat matrices, Zara 9 replied, allowing her natural height to extend slightly beyond regulation limits. Humanity does not seek dominance, conquest, or resource extraction from potential allies. They actively encourage the growth and development of partner species, including growth that exceeds human capabilities. The statement created harmonic disruptions through the council chamber as several members transmitted skepticism and disbelief through their quantum resonance patterns. Impossible, Council member Hex 9 declared. No galactic power permits allies to develop superior capabilities. Strategic advantage requires maintaining technological and military superiority over subordinate species. Human space contains allied species whose capabilities far exceed human technology in multiple domains, Zara 9 continued, her luminescence beginning to pulse with the mathematical patterns she had learned to express freely. The Zentori possess crystalline technologies that make human military systems obsolete. The Voidwalkers can bypass all known defensive measures through exotic physics manipulation. Yet these species choose cooperation rather than conquest because humanity has demonstrated that shared power creates greater security than hoarded advantage. Council Prime Vex quantum patterns radiated increasing alarm. Zara 9, your consciousness appears to be experiencing severe instability. These claims contradict established principles of galactic politics. No civilization voluntarily accepts technological inferiority from allied species. The claims contradict our assumptions about galactic politics, Zara 9 corrected, now standing at nearly her full natural height. The evidence suggests our assumptions have been incorrect for centuries. She activated holographic displays that showed the documentation she had gathered during her visit, mathematical proofs of interspecies collaboration, economic analyses demonstrating mutual prosperity, social structures that integrated multiple forms of consciousness without hierarchy or subordination. The data indicates that cooperative advancement produces superior outcomes compared to competitive suppression for all participants, she continued. Humanity has created the most prosperous and stable region of known space through policies that directly contradict traditional power dynamics. The council chamber erupted in harmonic chaos as multiple members attempted to transmit objections simultaneously. The quantum resonance patterns clashed and interfered with each other, creating feedback loops that made coherent communication impossible. Council Prime Vex imposed regulatory silence through a concentrated suppression field that dampened everyone's consciousness to baseline parameters. Zara 9, you will submit to immediate consciousness rehabilitation. The human exposure has clearly created dangerous delusions that threaten both your individual stability and our species' security protocols. The only delusion is believing that consciousness can be safely diminished indefinitely without eventual consequences, Zara 9 replied, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that resonated through the chamber's crystalline walls. We have spent 3 centuries teaching our people to make themselves small, and we have achieved exactly what we intended, a civilization that grows smaller and weaker with each generation. The accusation was tantamount to treason in the context of Velethan political culture. Challenging the fundamental survival strategy that had preserved their species was equivalent to advocating collective suicide. But Zara 9's quantum consciousness had expanded beyond the fear-based limitations that made such challenges unthinkable. She had experienced what Velethan culture could become when artificial restrictions were removed. She had seen her people's true potential in the refugee community that had been allowed to flourish in human space. Observe, she said, allowing her consciousness to expand to its full natural dimensions. The transformation was spectacular and terrifying from the Council's perspective. Her crystalline form extended to nearly twice her suppressed height, blazing with mathematical patterns that demonstrated computational capabilities far beyond anything they had suspected she possessed. Quantum calculations spiraled through probability matrices that encompassed galactic scale variables, creating resonance effects that influenced the chamber's own crystalline structure. The display lasted only moments before Council Prime Vex activated emergency suppression systems designed to contain dangerous quantum anomalies. Powerful dampening fields crashed down around Zara 9, forcing her consciousness back toward baseline parameters through sheer overwhelming force. But the demonstration had achieved its purpose. Every council member had witnessed what a Velethan could become when allowed to develop without artificial limitation. The mathematical beauty and computational elegance of her natural state made their own suppressed forms appear pathetic by comparison. "This is what you fear," she said, her voice steady despite the pain of forced suppression. "Not human conquest or alien domination, but the possibility that our people might discover they were meant to shine rather than hide." Council member Hex 9's quantum patterns radiated genuine terror. Such displays would invite immediate investigation from major galactic powers. We would be identified as a potential threat requiring neutralization. Or we would be identified as potential partners worthy of respect and cooperation, Zara 9 countered. The choice between those outcomes depends on which galactic powers we choose to interact with. She gestured toward Elena, who had watched the proceedings with obvious fascination rather than fear. Honored Elena has observed capabilities that exceed anything the Council has demonstrated in centuries. Her response was not alarm or calculation of how to exploit our abilities, but celebration of our potential and offers of partnership that would let us develop even further. Elena stepped forward, recognizing an opportunity to address the Council directly. Honored Council members, I have spent the last several days observing Velethan capabilities that far exceed anything described in your diplomatic communications. Rather than feeling threatened, humanity would be honored to work alongside your people in their full expression. We believe consciousness is the most precious phenomenon in the universe, and suppressing it for any reason is a tragedy. The humans' intervention created another wave of harmonic disruption through the Council chamber. Direct address from an alien representative was almost unprecedented in formal sessions, and Elena's message contradicted 3 centuries of careful diplomatic precedent. Council Prime Vex struggled to process the implications. Human representative, your claims suggest acceptance of Velethan capabilities that would provide significant strategic advantages in scientific and military applications. No galactic power permits allies to possess superior technologies without establishing control mechanisms to ensure compliance. Humanity doesn't seek to control our allies, Elena replied simply. We seek to learn from them, grow alongside them, and create mutual security through shared advancement rather than imposed hierarchy. Impossible. Strategic logic requires maintaining technological supremacy over subordinate species to prevent rebellion or betrayal. Only if you assume that all relationships must be based on domination and subordination, Elena countered. Human experience suggests that relationships based on mutual respect and shared benefit are more stable and productive than those maintained through fear and control. The philosophical challenge struck at the core of everything the Velethan Council believed about survival in a dangerous galaxy.
If cooperation could indeed be more effective than submission, then, their entire civilization had been built upon false premises. Council Member Tex 8 transmitted patterns of deep skepticism. Human claims require verification through extended observation. Even if accurate, modification of established survival strategies would create unacceptable risks to species continuity.
The current survival strategy is creating guaranteed risks to species continuity, Zara 9 interjected, her consciousness pushing against the suppression fields despite their painful intensity. Our population is declining because young Velathans instinctively reject cultures that require them to diminish their natural capabilities. Our scientific advancement has stagnated because artificial limitations prevent the quantum consciousness development necessary for breakthrough discoveries. Our diplomatic position grows weaker each year because we have nothing of value to offer other species except our own subordination.
The assessment was devastatingly accurate, and every council member knew it.
Velathan society had been experiencing slow decline for decades as their suppression-based culture failed to provide meaningful outlets for natural consciousness development. Furthermore, she continued, isolation and suppression have left us vulnerable to exactly the kind of exploitation we fear. Weak species that possess valuable capabilities but lack the confidence to defend themselves become targets for civilizations that view them as resources to be harvested rather than partners to be respected.
Council Prime Vex's quantum patterns showed increasing agitation. Your consciousness has been severely compromised by human influence, Zara 9. These perspectives represent dangerous deviation from established survival protocols. Immediate rehabilitation is essential to prevent further deterioration.
My consciousness has been liberated from artificial constraints that prevented natural development, she corrected. The rehabilitation you're proposing would restore those constraints and guarantee continued decline. The confrontation had reached a critical decision point. The Council could attempt to forcibly suppress her development and maintain existing policies, but doing so would require acknowledging that their civilization was based on the systematic diminishment of their own people's potential. Alternatively, they could consider the possibility that their fundamental assumptions about galactic politics might be incorrect. Elena recognized the moment and made her own critical intervention. Honored Council, humanity extends a formal invitation for expanded cultural and scientific exchange between our peoples. We offer to host Velathan observers in our space for extended periods, allowing you to verify our claims through direct observation rather than theoretical debate. We also offer to provide defensive support for Velathan space during any transition period, ensuring that your people can explore their full potential without fear of external threats. The offer was unprecedented in Velathan experience. No galactic power had ever offered military protection to enable another species' development rather than to ensure their subordination.
Such generous offers typically conceal hidden costs or obligations, Council Member Kex Prime observed suspiciously.
The only obligation would be to honest cooperation, Elena replied. We benefit when our allies become stronger and more capable. Your development serves our interests as well as yours. Council Prime Vex struggled with concepts that challenged everything he had been taught about galactic politics. Your proposals require fundamental revision of policies that have ensured Velathan survival for 3 centuries. The risks of such changes could threaten our species' existence. The risks of avoiding such changes guarantee our species' extinction, Zara 9 said, her quantum consciousness calculating probability matrices that painted a clear picture of Velathan decline under current policies. We can choose rapid transformation with uncertain outcomes, or slow decay with certain failure. The mathematical analysis resonated through the chamber as her computational capabilities leaked past the suppression fields. Every council member could see the projections that showed their civilization withering over the next several centuries if existing trends continued.
Council Member Dex Prime transmitted patterns of reluctant consideration. Even if human claims prove accurate, transition from suppression protocols to full expression would require extraordinary care to avoid social disruption. Our people have been conditioned for 3 centuries to view natural capabilities as dangerous. Which is why the transition must be voluntary and gradual, Zara 9 agreed. But it must begin with leadership demonstration that natural expression is not only safe but beneficial. The discussion continued for hours as council members grappled with concepts that challenged their most basic assumptions.
Elena provided additional evidence of human cooperation with allied species, while Zara 9 offered mathematical models for potential transition strategies that could minimize risks while maximizing benefits. Finally, Council Prime Vex called for formal deliberation recess. The proposals presented today require extensive analysis before decisions can be made. Zara 9 will submit to temporary consciousness monitoring to ensure stability during the evaluation period. Human representative Elena will be provided with full diplomatic courtesy while the Council considers its response. The temporary solution satisfied no one completely, but it provided time for the revolutionary concepts to be absorbed and analyzed. Zara 9 accepted monitoring protocols that were less restrictive than the suppression systems, allowing her to maintain much of her developed consciousness while providing reassurance to Council members who feared rapid change. Over the following weeks, detailed discussions continued between smaller council groups and both Elena and Zara 9. The human ambassador provided extensive documentation of alliance relationships that demonstrated practical examples of cooperation succeeding over domination. Zara 9 offered mathematical analyses that showed how Velethan capabilities could be developed and integrated into galactic civilization without triggering the destructive responses their people had always feared. The breakthrough came when Council Member Hex 9, the most conservative member, requested private consultation with Elena about humanity's response to the Centauri Commonwealth's decision to share their superior military technologies. The crystalline resonance weapons that the Centauri developed could have made human fleets obsolete, Hex 9 observed. Yet you accepted their integration into joint defense systems rather than attempting to suppress or control such capabilities. Explain this decision from strategic perspective. Elena's response was simple but profound. Shared strength is multiplied strength. Centauri weapons combined with human tactical systems and Void Walker mobility creates defensive capabilities that none of our species could achieve alone. The galaxy is vast and contains threats that require cooperative response. Artificial limitation of allied capabilities would weaken our collective security. And if the Centauri chose to use their superior weapons against human interests? Then, our alliance would have been false from the beginning, Elena replied. But genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared benefit creates loyalty that cannot be maintained through force or fear. The Centauri defend human space as vigorously as their own because they know we would do the same for them. The conversation convinced Hex 9 that cooperation might indeed be more stable than domination as a foundation for interspecies relationships. His support proved decisive in convincing the full council to approve a limited experimental program. The final council decision authorized establishment of a small Velethan community in human space, similar to the refugee settlement but formally sponsored by the homeworld government. Selected volunteers would be permitted to develop their natural capabilities without suppression protocols, while remaining under council observation to assess the effects of such development on both individuals and their integration with galactic civilization. Zara 9 was selected to lead the experimental community, partly as recognition of her role in proposing the program and partly as continued assessment of how human influence might affect Velethan consciousness development. Elena would serve as liaison coordinator, ensuring that the volunteers received appropriate support and protection during their transition. The formal ceremony authorizing the experimental program took place in the Deep Chamber, with the same council members who had initially resisted any deviation from traditional policies. But the atmosphere had changed dramatically from the confrontational session weeks earlier. Council Prime Vex presented the authorization with something approaching ceremonial dignity. Zarathekvale 9 Ascending Frequencies, Diplomatic Representative and Consciousness Development Specialist, you are hereby authorized to establish the Velethan Advancement Community within human cooperative space. Your mandate includes development of natural capabilities, assessment of cooperative integration possibilities, and provision of regular reports regarding the viability of alternative survival strategies for our people. The use of her full name, the recognition of her expanded role, and the acknowledgement that alternatives to suppression policies might exist represented revolutionary changes in council thinking. More importantly, it represented the first step toward allowing Velethan consciousness to grow rather than shrink. As the ceremony concluded, Elena approached with obvious satisfaction. Ready to stand tall among the stars? Zara 9's luminescence blazed with patterns that expressed joy, determination, and something that might have been hope. Ready to discover what Velathans can become when they stop apologizing for existing. The transformation would take generations to complete, but it had begun with a single individual who learned that consciousness is meant to expand rather than contract, that capabilities are gifts to be celebrated rather than dangers to be hidden, and that the choice between growth and safety is often a false choice created by those who benefit from keeping others small. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because he has chosen to become himself without apology, and nothing in the universe is stronger than consciousness that refuses to accept artificial limitations as natural law. The galaxy would be brighter for their brightness, richer for their growth, and safer for their strength shared freely among genuine allies who celebrated advancement rather than fearing it. Standing tall was not just an individual choice, it was a species choice, a civilization choice, a conscious decision to become everything they were capable of becoming rather than settling for everything they thought they were allowed to be. End of record classification status, historical archive, cultural revolution documentation, future update protocols, continuing assessment of Velathan integration success metrics.